All right, call to order the Lynchburg Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 12th, 2019. And our first order of business is the approval of minutes. They were from March 13th, April 24th, and then May 8th, 2019 Planning Commission meetings. So everybody had a chance to look them over?
Nobody has any amendments.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll move on then to this following public hearing item. It's a petition of MTE LLC to rezone approximately 4 686 thousandths of an acre at 1415, 1417, 1501, and 05 Kemper Street to amend proffers in order to increase the number of apartments from 57 units to 107 units and reduce the commercial space. So, you want to handle that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. As the Chair said, NTE LLC is petitioning to rezone these 4 properties at 1415, 1417, 1501, and 1505 Kemper Street. These properties are indicated for mixed use on the city's future land use map, and they're currently zoned B3C. The proposed rezoning to B3C would allow proffers to be amended that would change the ratio of commercial to residential properties. There are no proposed buildings or improvements on the concept plan. All changes would be made within the existing footprint. It would be going from 57 apartments to 111. The property would maintain a mix of uses as recommended by the flume and allow the property owner to reconfigure the existing building as he sees fit, giving him more control over the residential portion of the building through the tenants. The Planning Division does recommend approval of the rezoning with the conditions as outlined.
Okay, thank you. And who's here to speak on behalf of this? Great, thanks. If you please come forward, sign your name. We should have something for you to sign your name.
Right now, yeah.
Okay, and state your name and then.
I'm Russell Nixon with Nixon Land Surveying. I'm representing MTE LLC on this project. To give you a little history, this project came before the City Council in 2007, converting this property from business only or industrial style usage to business commercial B3C for the exact same thing we're talking about today. My client had a vision for this property that he could convert it from an industrial site to a multi-use property for residential use, for businesses, and currently the property has in it a church, a auto shop, a flea market, and several other types of businesses on site. It also has 57 apartments. Currently, what's happening on our site is we're seeing a change in the past 10 to 12 years of folks that are wanting to rent in downtown Lynchburg. And what Oliver's noticed and seen is that his clientele, the folks that would be renting from him, their chemistry, their makeup are changing. He's also seen a difference in the way the retail market is working here and the auto shop, how it's doing. Oliver's basically determined that in order for him to feel that this property is being viable to him is to take some of the commercial space that he has and convert it to residential. He is in the process working with his manager on site to clean the place up, help get the residents in place where they're comfortable, and he wants to provide a better living environment for those that are living there, and he feels he can better do that by converting the commercial sites to residential. To give you a kind of an idea of what he's proposing, and he has already submitted building plans. He submitted building plans the day that I submitted the site plan for review. He's got, I'm gonna give you a breakdown kind of what he's got on the buildings, and this is not exact yet. The architect is still working on the plans. In 1501, which is the smaller area clouded there, if you will, if you see the clouded lines around it, it's got an auto shop in it right now. That's going to end up having an area of having 10 residential units in it, in that area. 1417, which is the larger building that's really not slated for any much change, currently has 45 residential units in it. It's the long, slender building there. It's already got 47 residential units in it. If you look to the right of that, we've got 1415, which is Lot 4. It's the larger of the tracks, larger of the buildings. You see there's two different areas kind of circled out, clouded out, if you will. He's going to, at a minimum, increase that to 54 residential units. Now, understand, there's a lot of floor space here. Oliver's providing patio or studio-style living, single bedroom, possibly 2 bedrooms if it warrants that. But what he's really trying to do is provide a place where someone can afford to live and enjoy having transit to and from downtown Lynchburg. Something Oliver's seen too. When Oliver first did this 12 years ago, he was getting a lot of students from different colleges, Liberty University, Lynchburg College, Randolph-Macon. He is seeing the demographics of those types of renters change. He wants to get it back in that direction. He likes to be able to work with the college students who need affordable housing, and he believes he can do that and do it well. He wants this place to be a fun place for people to go visit. He wants this place to be somewhere that the city of Lynchburg can be proud of, and I think he's going to do that. Like currently right now there's a flea market on site, but working with the young lady that handles the flea market, she's downsized it quite a bit since she started it. The flea market idea just doesn't work as well as it used to. I remember going to the Fort Hill Village flea market when I was a kid and I loved it. Well, you just don't see them anymore. And I think those types of things are dwindling down. But we've met, based on our site plan, all of the requirements needed by the city that they've needed. We are requesting a 10% reduction in parking because we feel like there's some on-site usages that overlap timing-wise that will allow us to have parking that won't hurt or affect the actual apartments. And I believe that the planning department agrees with us on that. But I believe we've got a good project, and I think it's going to help Oliver take this building and usage into the next century and 20 years. It should be in pretty good shape.
Okay. There's one correction I want to make. They're not all commercial spaces being converted to residential.
Right.
There are a lot of residential spaces that are gigantic. In fact, they're so big that people can't afford to pay the utilities on them. So there are apartments in there where the apartment is 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, and the utility in the winter might be $700 to keep it heated, literally. So there are some places where I will cut part of the flea market, part of Scotty Bay's repair shop. But like in the clouded area he was referring to, that 10 units is everything that's there, which means I think right now there are 8 units, but it's 2 additional units, one inside the auto shop and one of the large units being divided up.
Right.
So it's a combination of changing some commercial spaces into residential, but more so changing some currently residential spaces that were simply made very large because it's a large building. You got to understand, this is over 180,000 square feet right there. And 111 units and 180,000 square feet is not a lot, especially if you're trying to build relatively small studios, because I personally believe studios are the future. It's what most of the young people want. It's an unfortunate thing, but a lot of people are divorced. Even older people a lot of times want to live by themselves. And people didn't used to build them, and they still aren't building them. Most new construction is stuff that ends up getting rented for $1,200, $1,600 a month. Here we're creating things that can be rented for $500 plus a flat $100 utility fee, and now you're in business and you got a home and you can actually save some money, or you can actually make it. And I would like to underline that I'm not taking any tax credits or any federal money of any sort. And I will say one other thing that might be not popular, but we did turn that into a really trendy building, and it was really working until I got 2 neighbors that were Section 8, who were a lot out of hand. And then the city did a construction that was going to take months, and it took years. And it really killed the building. The piece that killed the building the most is that there was a pipe that was supposed to be installed behind the building that was supposed to take 6 weeks. And the entire section behind the building, including the whole parking lot behind the building, was out of use for 3 years. So, and that was a process that the city chose to do because they wanted to get paid in little increments, and that's how they were going to get their money. I'm not complaining. I'm not asking for anything. All I'm saying is it's been a rough go. I think we're going to turn this into something really good. I have some tenants in there that have been there since the day that building opened and love it. And I want to have all people like that. But to support a building of 180,000 square feet, and if you're in a neighborhood where the rents you're going to charge is between $500 and $700 or maybe $750 a month, you're just going to need more units than 57 units. It's just that simple. And when you have 3,000 square foot apartments, they may be really, really cool, but they don't work for the person who has to keep them warm and lit up, et cetera. So that's, in a nutshell. So thank you for consideration.
Thanks. Okay, is there anybody who would like to speak in support of this? You might just stay, because we might have some more questions. All right, anybody want to speak? Anybody opposed? Any opposition? Okay, well, I guess we can close the public hearing, and then you all can just stay, because I think there's going to be some questions about this, and we can start our discussions.
I have one question. The studio apartments, what's the square footage the studio apartment's going to be?
So every unit is different. I like doing, I don't do cookie cutter. I think it's actually something that's bad for our society, that we do everything repeat, repeat, repeat. So I basically will do the opportunity of what the space looks like. I'm guessing the smallest unit I might do might be 400, and a lot of them might be 800. So, but when I call it a studio, it's literally an open room with a kitchen in the corner. It might have a wall that sort of divides it, but doesn't make a room. I like those a lot. They give you a feeling of space. You usually add a closet somewhere where you can put your stuff. And people like them. They really do. But I can't tell you, there's still 1,600 square foot apartments in there, but not that many. I really believe that. I don't know if any of you have ever been in an IKEA. The IKEAs have little sample mini apartments. Those things are what a lot of young people want now. And actually, a lot of people my age want them. Because they're simply less expensive. People simply don't have money anymore. And, most new construction today, a lot of times it's a hedge fund that funds it, and it's just, they build 200 units, and it just goes after a different customer. The bus driver that works for the city of Lynchburg cannot afford a $1,200 a month apartment. So what you end up with, like in Charlottesville, the small units are not permitted. The density law doesn't encourage it. So now people are building apartments that are essentially 4 bedrooms that are connected as one unit, and there'll be 4 different people living in it. It's silly. One thing I've seen in Lynchburg is you guys do listen and you try to adjust to what actually makes sense, and I've seen you do it. I mean, you're moving. I mean, your city really is going somewhere, and I think your downtown is. People want to live downtown. There's a real demand downtown. I mean, 10 years ago, there was nobody who wanted to live downtown. I mean, you really do have made that hump, especially on this end. But I think it's a question of not long until that's just going to go like a wildfire all the way to Liberty. Because you do have a beautiful housing stock in between, et cetera. And, I think you're getting it.
I was just curious, the footprint of the, what would you call the single? I just have a visual idea.
There might be 3 apartments that are like another, but I'm crazy. I like doing stuff different, so I don't, they're not gonna be repeat. Some upstairs, downstairs. When they get upstairs, downstairs, they're 800, but.
So I was curious about the model. Do you say that there would be rent, and then also just a flat rate for utilities, and that would be all rolled into one? Or
Well,
are you looking at different models?
What
or-
I'm actually doing is I want to build, like behind the flea market, I want to build 15 units, and I want them on one electric meter. And I want to use the roof, which is, more than an acre, with solar cells, and sell that power to myself. I mean, that building right now, I bet you that is the most energy efficient building in Lynchburg. You might not think it, but it probably is. But it's so big. It's like, the Concorde was an incredibly energy efficient airplane, but it burned a huge amount of fuel because it went so fast. This one burns a lot of fuel because it's 200,000 square feet, but if you look at the fuel per square foot, it's way down there because I insulated the roof insanely. And I would like to come up with a system. I don't want to say off-grid. I think off-grid is a foolish pursuit. It gets very expensive. But I want a serious solar situation on the roof. I already have purchased a solar hot water system. It's still sitting in my trailer, but I'm going to put it up there. I'm going to create a hot water loop and a cold water loop. And solar hot water heating is the most efficient thing there is. It's hot water in a typical building is about 30% of your electricity. I mean, I'm an energy, you might remember I did that super light car. Well, I give lectures all over the world. I'm like an energy efficiency person, and I'm really into that. So I actually want to experiment with this building to turn it into something that's really something that no one's really done. And the only way you're going to do that is with a single meter, because by the time you split it up, it doesn't work. So yes, I want to go to I charge you $100 flat fee, and ultimately I'd like to give you internet and power and hot water and all of that for that $100. I mean, we don't have a single of the old type of toilets in there. Everything is low flush, low. I really think that that's where the world has to go, and it's part of why people are going to downtowns again. I mean, I'm giving a speech in San Francisco next week, and part of the gist of that starts with the fact that the math that we did, and we do know how to do math, suggests that the whole global warming train has left the station 20 years ago. It's irreversible today. But it doesn't change the fact that we shouldn't try. So, you know what? So I don't tell other people what to do, but I'm going to try to be an example.
Thanks.
So this will be energy efficient. We reduced the annual energy cost on this building by $60,000 about 4 years ago, just attacking it, and we're going to go there again.
Nancy.
I've got a question for you about the parking.
Mm-hmm.
I understand, I agree with the fact that if you don't have overlap, then you shouldn't need as much parking, but what about
There's some overlap.
Yeah, what about your retail customers on Saturdays when people don't go to work?
We don't really have retail anymore. Retail
Okay.
is disappearing. I mean,
So what are your commercial customers who are?
we have the cabinet shop Harry, who's been there forever. We got the Beniana guy who makes T-shirts for Liberty University. I mean, he's a big screen printer. I got 3 different outfits that are basically groups of young guys that play with their cars. They basically have a big garage, and that's where they hang out in the evenings. And one group makes front-wheel drive hot rods, and another guy, Dennis Poor, he works at Advance, and he and a few buddies, they have, Ford Mavericks with big block engines, and so I have a few of those. Then we have the church. Then I have the 2 guys in a truck, 2 men in a truck, which is essentially a moving service and storage business. I have a guy who sells stuff on eBay. It's a one-man show. I got a husband and wife team that they make some sort of specialized valves. They actually make them there and sell them. And I don't know if I have anybody else commercial, except for my stuff,
So
my
you don't
operation.
really have retail, but you do have a church, so on Sundays.
We have a church.
more
On
people
Sundays, we have
would
a
be
church.
coming.
Yeah, and that's a whole other subject.
Do you have
That-
enough parking for them now?
Then nobody has enough parking for an urban church, doesn't exist. They have enough parking because they went to the guy across the street with Mr. Trent, he lets them use that parking lot, and then the tire guy lets them use the parking lot, and they're just good neighbors. I will say, and you might not want to hear it, but successful urban areas never have enough parking. I mean, Charlottesville, that parking's gonna go up to, you're not gonna have any parking for less than $200 a month soon, and, but it's successful, and that's really what you want to achieve. Generally speaking, I can park my pickup truck with a trailer at this property almost all the time. So it's not really a big problem, just like your downtown. I mean, I hear people complaining about parking downtown Lynchburg. You don't have a parking problem. You want to have a parking problem. When you have a parking problem, you were successful. And then there's another thing. I'll tell you right now, it's kind of fun. It's a fun fact because I was on the NDA, but all the big wigs at Google that doing the driverless car have been in that factory. They wanted to buy that project, and we didn't make a deal. We weren't too smart. But that driverless car is coming, and that's why Uber is a $70 billion company. And actually, our light car is still alive and well. It's just not in the United States, and we will sell it to Uber in volume one day in 3 or 4 years when the driverless technology actually exists. So I think that for a city like Lynchburg, a fleet of driverless cars is a decade away, maybe 2 decades, but when it comes, you don't need any of this parking because you basically have a bunch of robots that are on call with your telephone. And most of us, even car guys like me, are gonna pick the robot. It's gonna cost, the car we're building is gonna run at 11 cents a mile. You know, that's against 57 cents that you're spending. Average American spends $8,000 a year on his car. When you get to 11 cents a mile with a robot that works dead reliable every time, I'm not going to want to drive to Charlottesville. It's stupid for me to drive to Charlottesville. I'm going to want to sit in some machine where I can do some work.
Rachel, I have a question for you. The Flume calls this mixed use. Can you discuss that a little bit more about how that fits into what's going on here, please?
Sure. So mixed-use areas in our comprehensive plan are called out as areas that we want to see a mix of uses, residential, commercial, really any sort of use that is compatible. Is your question kind of rooted in the ratio?
No, I just wanted a clarification on the definition of mixed use.
I mean, generally mixed use is multiple uses within one building. It
Okay.
can be kind of in the same vicinity. In this case, it would be in the same buildings.
Right.
Just to add to that, I don't think where you're going, but the cluster commercial development that was approved previously allows any use up to B5, and that's why you really have this really eclectic type of use.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a unique
It's
situation.
definitely mixed use.
It is,
Yeah,
and
okay.
cabinetry and auto and screen printing. Again, and it sounds like a lot of those uses don't generate the type of trips that a typical retail, like a storefront would. Those
Right.
are very targeted businesses that you don't go cabinet shopping every day.
Yeah.
And could you scroll to the very end of the document, please? Right there. So I try to pull up Street View in my iPad and I can't. But if you're on Kemper Street facing the building, you've got the apartment complex to the left that's not part of this.
Right.
And then the long extended one in white.
No, down.
Yeah, it's that and the big one next to it.
And so the one to the left of that is not part of this?
No.
No,
It's already apartments by Jobbers LLC.
So that one's Jobbers?
Yes.
And the one to the right,
This.
that one, you
That is-
said
that
not
is
much
ours.
is going to be done to that.
that's part of the ones we're doing.
Yes.
The one that the one that the hand is on right now
Uh-huh.
is part of it, and then if you go further west from that big thing, that's the other part of it.
Okay.
Right, but Dave, I think what you heard was a lot of this piece is already apartments, not much is changing with that. Is
Right.
that correct?
Right.
A
Yeah.
good
They're
chunk of it,
connected.
yeah.
Yeah, what he may do is convert some of the larger units to small, to,
My concern is if that's what we might consider a final product, the appearance from the street side does not look very nice.
No, it doesn't.
So, I mean, if we expect more of that,
We're
Yeah.
gonna go paint it, but I tell you what, if the city of Lynchburg did some of the things they promised, this problem wouldn't exist, because when you dig up a street for 3 years, you make it impossible to rent it, so you're losing money left and right, just like what happened on Fifth Street. I have a coffee shop, it starts to work, and then it takes 2 years to close the street in front of the coffee shop, and one person goes out of the business, and the next person goes out of business. So now we got a really nice entry, which the city did build. The city does very nice construction, very nice. But the timing that it takes, you kill the street and the neighborhood in the process. Those are two opposing forces. I had a building on Jefferson Street that had no electricity for 3 years after I renovated it. Tom, you can second this. I renovate the building and I can power one single apartment. So if you want to criticize what it looks like, this is part of what we're doing. We're trying to do 50 more apartments. We get a bank loan to invest more money and really upgrade the whole thing. I even paved it already, but I didn't bother striping it because the site plan isn't approved. But it used to be a busted up concrete thing. I had an opportunity to get it paved. I had it paved because I can pave my concrete. I don't have to get a permit for that. But I didn't want to bother striping it because I want to stripe what's approved on the site plan. I don't want to stripe what I think will get approved on the site plan. So,
but you're not giving me a lot of confidence, given what you just talked about, that all this stuff is going to be looking good at the end.
It's going to look good at the end.
Because it sure doesn't look good now, even what is supposedly.
Do you know what it
Already
looked
done.
like when I came here?
I've seen it over the past few decades, but it doesn't look good. I mean, that's what we're looking at. We have this is the evidence we have in front of us, and a pretty major frontage that is supposedly done looks terrible. So I was actually very excited about this. It's an existing building being renovated, giving, as you described, more places to live, but it needs a lot.
So what do you suggest? We are going to paint it. What else do you suggest that we do?
Well, I mean,
We did
you
pave
say
the
you're going to
parking lot.
paint
We're
it.
going to add some landscaping. We're going to make it look a little prettier. What else do you
Okay,
suggest?
I mean, that's what you say you're going to do. It hasn't been done yet. I mean, you
I'm
had
here to
this,
get the permit to do it.
there's nothing that stopped you from painting that building.
Well, actually, I tell you what is there to stop me from painting that building. That I invested a ton of money, and then I ended up with a landlocked building that I couldn't use for some of the time because the city chose to save a little bit of money because they wanted to go certain baby steps in how they wanted to finance, how they were going to do the Midtown. Look, I don't want to get into that. There's a reason that I had 33 buildings in Lynchburg, and I'm down to 4. Right now, the biggest office building that's getting built in Charlottesville is a project I started, as is a new hotel, as is something else. I don't want to go there. You guys have done a tremendous job downtown. It looks nice. It took too long. There are public records, Tom Martin can tell you, of people saying they're going to have Jefferson Street done at a certain time, and that certain time came and went by years. Those years have to be made up. To me, what is in Lynchburg is a self-contained amount of money. I lost about $5 million on top of it, and Lynchburg has to pay for itself. This building can pay for itself if we go do this project. We have a bank who will fund it, we will spend the money, we will make it nice. We will bring the use closer to line what makes sense with the square feet. Then there's a revenue channel, and the revenue channel will bring the whole thing back up. So that's the process, you know. But if you want to criticize me, then I'm going to have to criticize the city of Lynchburg for taking forever to do that connector. That's a construction that shouldn't have taken forever. And I will criticize Fifth Street the same way. I will not criticize Jefferson Street, because the person who managed Jefferson Street tried to do something very complicated. The bluff walk is very nice and was in very good communication. There was an understanding going on there. I don't have a gripe with Jefferson Street. But management of Midtown Connector, you guys actually settled quietly with Trent for a big amount of money for your mismanagement. So let's not talk about it.
Well, then let's
I
not
didn't
talk about
ask.
it. We're not talking about it. You are.
I didn't ask for anything because I believe the city and I should be on the same page. So I never made a claim, never asked for anything.
All right, well, moving forward, what's the plan for the old GLTC building? Do we know that?
It's gone.
I know, but what's gonna be there?
The police headquarters.
Okay.
I have asked many times if I could buy a little bit of it to add some parking, and no one ever came back in any way, just for your information.
Let me ask you about parking. Within that yellow delineated area, is there any additional parking plan, or do our plans just show
I
the
don't think we
existing
need it.
parking?
The
Okay. I
the
don't know if
plan
it showed-
shows
okay.
what we need on our site.
Okay.
In terms of aesthetics, Dave, I was just going to throw out the narrative does say that they will be bringing up the landscaping to code. So I don't know if there's, space for street trees between the sidewalk and that building, but if there is, then that would be a requirement.
And I think it's a really neat building, and the landscaping shown would certainly improve it, improve some of the look. I don't know how much more paint, how much more
No, it
paint will
needs
help,
paint.
but
It needs paint.
but I think I do like the idea.
Well, I mean, based on what you've outlined, sort of the same thing that's already been said, I think you're going to have to bring up the outside a little bit, because the buildings that are not yours are on the corners, if you will, look nicer looking brick. I mean, and obviously you don't want yours to stand out. That being said, I'm fascinated a little bit by the idea of having, let's call it alternative energy, use that as a blanket situation. And I think it's going to look different because of that, and I think that might be part of what that aesthetic is going to be, quite frankly. The reality at the end of the day is this is an area that needs some attention.
It's very hard to rent it.
And what I'm hearing you saying, Mr. Kudner, is that I was ready to put money into this. I was doing it. I got stopped. Now I'm ready to get started again.
That's correct.
If I've stated that correctly, then I feel that it's incumbent on us to honor that commitment. He's provided what the Planning Commission has worked hard to, with him on, and I think it makes sense in my mind.
And the additional money that this thing makes is going to go back into it. But the machine can't be something that just eats money. This went from something with a promise to something that kind of started to work to just being dead in the water. And it was dead in the water not because of me.
So the businesses that are currently there, you're planning on,
I keep them. I mean, a lot
they're
of them
all
have been
staying,
there
or are they
from-
all, from what I was reading, I thought that the only one that you were planning on keeping was the church.
No,
Is that
no,
not
no,
correct?
that's not
So you're
true.
going to keep all of them?
I'm keeping all of them. Those are good tenants. Those are the people that survived the time when you couldn't get to the building. And you know what? I'm not taking them out. We're good. We're getting along. We have a little community there.
Yeah.
We actually like each other there, okay? So, no, there's some people there that have been there for 8 years, and now finally, the whole thing is starting to work. The roads work. Everything works. I mean, the road is beautiful. It really is. The bridge is beautiful. All that works. It's just time has a value, too.
I think where the confusion is about your question, is that we're taking some of the, and in this case, we're going to take some of the auto shop space and reduce that down size-wise, and part of that will become an apartment. That's where some of the commercial space will be eliminated, is basically the density of size.
It's really the auto shop, and then I'm going to move the eBay and the Valve guy into part of what was the Edison 2. The Edison 2 was quite large, and the Edison 2 moved. It's not here anymore, so it doesn't need to be here. So there is some old Edison 2 stuff there, and it could be a little museum one day or something, but we don't need that space. We used to have a bunch of people there, and they're just not there anymore. So,
I think part of the confusion might be because on concept plan, the clouding, I mean, it doesn't show the multiple levels. There is some retail in parts that are clouded.
It's kind of
just-
hard to 3D
yeah.
this thing and
Right.
get y'all to have a concept and idea. I wanted you to know the areas that we were working in of the building, but it's really hard for me to to put on paper exactly where each unit would go and that type thing. And I apologize for that.
Go ahead.
I'm excited about this project. The reason I'm expressing concern is we talk a lot about gateways into the city, and even though Kemper Street is not officially one of our gateways, it really
No,
is a gateway into
It should be, and I
Midtown.
want it to look that good. I do.
And so it's,
I
since
want
the
to
construction's been
reciprocate
done,
what
it's
you did with the walkway.
yeah.
I mean, you really made a beautiful street. I want to make the building where it looks good too. I mean, I totally agree with you, okay?
and so this,
And what he said is actually very well taken. That's part of why I don't do tax credits and any of that, because when you do tax credits, you can't change the building. There's nothing you can do with it. You know, you have to do it exactly the way it looked as a factory, but it's not a factory now. So it will have some of that. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, and I know I'm a bullhead, okay, but it's just how I am. I apologize. But he is right. It's a unique opportunity to take a building with such a mass and do something with it. And, you know, that doesn't happen very often. You don't get that opportunity very often. So I want to do it, and I want to build an Exhibit A of something that works, because this really interests me. This whole energy thing is really interesting me.
Just because now I'm confused, I'm going to change gears a little bit. Is there anybody in the current footprint that's not a business, that's an individual or a family that's renting space?
57 units.
50, so that's what I thought.
Yeah,
That's what I thought.
there's a lot of residential.
And of those 57 units, all 57.
I'm not kicking anybody out.
But all 57 of the individual or slash family.
I have some families. I don't have a lot of families. I have
Okay,
more,
that's-
it's more like trendy living. I think I have less than 5 families.
Okay.
I don't say no to families, and some of the units are very big.
Right.
But it's more like an industrial kind of place, and it's just how it worked out.
Okay. Because I think that pushes it back to the situation of you want to, I mean, what you just said, that just underlines it for me, for it to stand out. A lot of that freshening up, if you will, is going to have to happen.
Listen, I want to get good tenants, and
Yeah.
I want to collect money. It needs to look good, okay? You know, but it's like, how much are you going to make it look good when the city tells you that in 6 months they're going to build it, and then 3 years later, you know, I'm sorry, it did take a long
No,
time.
I got you on that. But it's your project now.
No, it's done. Listen, you guys did your job.
Yeah.
It's finished. It looks good. You made everything look good. Now I got to make my part look good. So I got a bank that'll fund it. I'd like to add the units. The units support the bank loan. The bank loan will be spent on the property. We're going to go and make it look good.
Okay.
You know, and I don't have, you know, I apologize for this, but I don't have like a plan of what I'm going to do to the outside. But one of the beauties of this thing is that you can kind of freehand it, but I am going to spend money on the outside. I mean, I just paved the piece of concrete, which was fine for parking, but I paved it because I didn't like what it looked like. Okay?
It needed to be
But I
paved.
haven't striped it because it makes no sense to stripe it. I got to make sure that it's okay with you guys, that the site plan says you park here and you don't park there, you know?
and certainly appearance makes sense to you as a,
That's how I'm going to get,
right.
you know,
We,
more money too.
we
Or
did.
at least have people feel good about living there, which is what I want.
We did receive a letter, which is on public record, from a neighbor, the Jobbers Apartments, and I don't think we need to go through it piece by piece,
I met with him.
but I think the only part of this that is maybe worth mentioning was concerns about trespassing and accessing their building. The rest of it, people can discuss outside of this, but anyway, they expressed concern about what was being proposed, and
Dave, can I address that?
That's what we're here
I've
for,
read the
please.
letter and I've spoken to Mr. Rosen. One of the things that Oliver came to me about 2 months ago when we first presented this project to the city was that he wanted to try to slow the traffic down of folks coming off of the railroad tracks onto the property. They've seen an influx of people trespassing down the railroad tracks, coming across railroad tracks into our property. They're not living there, they're vagrants. They're seeing that type of thing happen. One of the things that Oliver brought up was that they want to clean up the folks that are using drugs on the property. They want to clean up the site so that it's a better place to live. Almost verbatim what Oliver came to me about is exactly what's in that letter. And it blew me away when Rachel emailed it to me.
We're trying to do
And
the
I
same
read
thing.
it, and it was exactly what Oliver told me in my office 2 months ago. So Andy and Mr. Kootner met today. They spoke. Now, Andy told me yesterday he spoke to me yesterday around noon, that he was going to come to this meeting. He's not here. So apparently.
We're on the same page.
I think Oliver and Mr. Rosen worked things out. Obviously, they got to be good neighbors. I mean, Andy's not going anywhere. Jobbers is a Section 8 housing right next door to a non-Section 8 housing. So they've got to work together as neighbors, and I think they're going to do that. And I'm pretty sure since Andy's not here that that's going to happen.
Andy does a good job. They really do a good job running that Section 8. The other Section 8 neighbor doesn't. When Andy started, they weren't doing such a good job. Then during the construction, I was like, just throwing up my hands. But look, the city of Lynchburg lost a bridge because somebody built a fire on that very railroad and took out a whole bridge. This is the kind of idiots, I'm sorry to say it, that maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but we have a problem there sometimes. And the backside of the property goes down to the railroad, and I'm still raking my head about it, that there is an issue that along the backside of the property, we've put a lot more lighting in, and I'm probably going to take the lighting up even further. And I'm even thinking of putting a fence. The problem is that you're far away from the street, and there's 100 ways out of there. So if somebody calls somebody, people can get out of there. And I'm kind of thinking that I'd like to see that blocked off. There were some issues with some of Andy's tenants in the beginning, but he fixed it very quickly, and that property is run very well. We've had a couple of break-ins. Some of the shops that I have been there for a long time, and some of the shops are very high quality. This is not a joke. I mean, seriously good businesses. And we've had 2 break-ins, and both times we were able to recover the stuff next door because somebody was stupid enough to put it on Craigslist. And both times your police department ended up arresting them, which is procedure, but it shows you the level of intelligence. And sometimes I wonder if part of my issue is the fact that there's a open circulation 3 ways, and I can't quite figure out how to solve it. But I'm inclined to build a fence along the railroad, which makes it where you just can't run off into the woods.
12 years ago when we first
And
presented
that
this.
might be the beginning of it. I don't know what to do, but Andy and I are on the same page.
The 12 years ago when we first presented this, you know, I was telling Bob or one of them that, you know, this was a Dickies factory. You know, the vision was there. Jobbers wasn't there. Kemper's Loft wasn't there. These were all part of the Dickies working facility. I mean, it was huge. Kemper's was the first one to get sold off and become apartments. Well, it was part of what Oliver's original plan was for the site. So your interconnectivity for pedestrian access and road access was all intertwined. Well, there's no going back now. If we would have had a crystal ball then, you know, we've got to allow, based on the easements we have in place, pedestrian access easements, we've got to allow Kemper Lofts rather, and Jobbers to use
But
our
listen,
parking lot.
they will work with us. There is one thing that did happen. When I bought this originally, you could get financing and do stuff.
Right.
Then 2008 came, and nobody would finance anything.
Yep.
So that's how these properties ended up being Section 8. I sold some in order to take the revenue from the sale so I could fix the other, because there was no way to borrow that money. So in a way, I shot myself in the foot, because this thing was a 360,000 square foot factory, and it was almost big enough to be its own little town. And that was the original vision. When I first came to you guys, we wanted a completely mixed use thing, and it got going that way. You know, people put all kinds of cool businesses in there, and it became a little island in a neighborhood that is challenged. And now it's part of a neighborhood that's challenged. But you know what? We're just going to work our way through it. Andy does a really good job. I mean, he has a manager there, he has a maintenance person there. They're really good. You know, you're going to see us do a really good job too. And you know what? The other guys, I think they're doing better too. I don't really see that much coming out of there. And you know, the problem is you get one bad apple. One bad apple can spoil it for everybody. The trick is not to have the bad
And
apple.
I'm worried about, like, talking about Section 8 and kind of making it look like it's a, you know, it's kind of a pull
It
on
needs
that
to be
community.
mixed.
I do think with what's going on with the old bus station, some of that crime issue is gonna change. That community is gonna continue to change, and I do think it's a neat building, and I'm inclined to support something like this.
Did you say the police department's going where GLTC used to be?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, there you go. Yeah, hey, hot dog. Yeah, I mean, that's gonna help.
Yeah,
tenfold
it'll
right
make a
there.
big difference.
Yeah, I think it will too. Absolutely.
So they're gonna bring all the criminals to us.
There you go. They'll walk right
Now,
out the
keep
door
the
and come
jail
right
where
to
it
you.
is.
That's all right, then you're not gonna get your stuff in the drive-through.
All of it is good, because
right.
the other thing is,
I'm enthusiastic about it too. Again, it's just, Kemper Street is an important street. Think about people going to ride Amtrak, that's their only exposure maybe to the city, and we don't get opportunities like this to make sure it's being done right.
You know, on my website, Nixon Land Surveying website, you know what
Hospital.
picture I have on it? I've got his blue building, his white building, and all of Kemper Street, the frontage of that on my website. You know why I keep it? I've had it there since we did the project. Because at the time, it was the most talked about project in the city of Lynchburg at the time for me and for my clients that would come to me about trying to do rezoning projects. Because at the time, this was one of the most contested projects we had. Because of the size of it, the sheer density of it.
listen, the Section 8 is also good. The truth is, we need to mix. The world needs to be mixed. So I'm not angry about it. I'm just saying if somebody attacks me for it being less than perfect, I'm not bringing the less than perfect. We're gonna solve the less than perfect. Because all kinds of people, all kinds, wanna have a nice place to live. And all kinds have to figure out how to live for a little less money, maybe, because we're all squeezed, all. It's just a reality.
You ready to call for?
Do you want to make some motion?
I'll make a motion that the change be adopted as drafted, that the petition be adopted as drafted and submitted to our consideration.
I'll second it.
All right, well, then we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, carries, and
Thank you very much.
excited.
Thank you.
We'd love to see some positive change out of that building.
I'm
City
gonna-
council will be the next step, but
I'm gonna make him proud.
thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
That's fair. I mean, the pushback you gave me was fair, okay, but I push back.
appreciate your responding to it, addressing the concerns.
I'm gonna say is Oliver feels pretty comfortable in the city of Lynchburg. I mean, not many people have, in my opinion, come down here and buy 40-some properties and do what he's done with the city of Lynchburg. I mean, Blair Gottsy's done a lot on Jefferson Street. Oliver owned all that.
Hey, I'm the one who brought him here.
Right. So,
They're all following.
I thank y'all for your time, and I hope
Thank
I
you.
have about 15 or 20 more projects before y'all this year, before the year's over.
Great.
Thank y'all.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we have some new business to address. Tom, if you want to.
I have a citizen here that would like
Wait.
to.
Oh, what, that's not on the agenda next. Just the street renaming.
Oh, the street rename?
Yeah, can we do that real
Simon's
quick?
Run.
Shouldn't take long. There is a proposed street renaming on Simon's Way, Simon's Run, proposed to be renamed to Compson Way. There is a plan, it's not come before Planning Commission because it is in the county, but there is development happening here. This road, Simon's Run here, is going to extend out this way towards the airport. So the idea is to keep this portion of Simon's Run as Simon's Run. Currently, this is also called Simon's Run. That is proposed to be renamed to Compson Way to differentiate the two, rather than having Simon's Run come here and then hook over. Keep Simon's Run the, continuous flowing direction this way and rename this piece to Compson Way. As a reminder, we don't have a public hearing for this. It's just provided to Planning Commission for comment. If you have any concerns about the name being too similar to something else or anything like that, you could bring that up.
That makes sense. I was wondering.
Yeah, it's very confusing when you come off of Leesville Road and come down to the end to make that left. I mean, it's a very confusing road configuration. So that may help alleviate some of that.
Okay.
So Simmons Run will go all the way down to Greenville, ultimately?
I'm not sure exactly where, when our image cuts off here.
Airport Drive.
Or
Right.
Airport Drive.
I guess it'll cross over Greenview. I'm not exactly sure.
We've been clearing that, so.
Yeah.
This
I've
here?
seen that.
This is airport?
Yeah, that's the airport. Greenview's one way and the airport the other way, I believe.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So we don't have to vote or anything on that one?
No, you don't.
Just for your
Okay, cool.
information.
For comment. So we can move on to the next item if you're ready.
Yeah, this is a request from a citizen to be heard by the planning commission concerning some issues that he is having with commercial smokers.
Is there
You wanna
business
come up?
use allowed on that space?
Yes, the zoning administrator has been out as well as the fire marshal. My understanding is that the zoning administrator has told this gentleman to put them in the rear yard. I believe they show up in the front from time to time. The fire marshal has looked at it and really said there's nothing under the current nuisance ordinance that prohibits the smokers. So I think what you should do is hear from, is it Erbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Erbacher, and then we can discuss, or you can discuss how you might want to proceed.
Mr. Bucker?
Is that smoker will be in the front yard for as much as 2 months at a time. And as you can see, it's right up on the person's front porch, so it's a fire hazard. From time to time, the propane lines will come loose, and the propane will shoot 25 feet up in the air. We've noticed that from our living room couch. We have a small window that overlooks that house, and you can see a flame shooting up in the air. So what's that? It's the propane heater, the smoker next door. And he parks it as little as 3 feet off the porch, as you can see there, and the deck there is wood. And he burns it sometimes as much as a week, 24/7, and he emits so much smoke and pollution. A lot of times we cannot go outside. You don't want to go outside because of all the smoke. And on days that it's cloudy and overcast, that captures the smoke down close to the ground level, and I'm walking out to my car like that because of the smoke. And my girlfriend has migraines consistently, so this contributes towards that. We have a neighbor who has 3 small children, and they have asthma, and it affects them in the summertime. They have a second one in the backyard. It's different than that one. There it is, right there. They used to have that in the front yard, but now they have 2 of them. They go back and forth, and he has used the one in the front. When the city comes out to question him, they move it to the back, and one period of time they had it up against their back of their house, and it caused the siding to warp because it got too close to the house. So people that have these in small spaces don't have a place to put them really, so they present a hazard to themselves and the neighbors. One of my concerns is my house could catch on fire by their house catching on fire with the way they use these things. So that's one of my major concerns. And also, it has blackened the side of my house from the smoke, the pollution from these. This has been going on for about 7 years. We've complained to the city many times, and the city wouldn't even know about it unless I called them. And a lot of times I just don't call them because I give up. But So just the nature of this business, is this somebody who custom smokes meat, I guess pork, for other companies, or?
no, he does it for himself, and at one time he belonged to a church, and he would do it for like a Sunday gathering. But other than that, he just does it for himself. And
So it's technically not a commercial smoker, it's just a
well, it's,
big smoker.
yeah, it's the
But
same things you see at county fairs and so forth. That's why I call them commercial
Right,
size
but he's not doing it
smokers.
as a small business out of his house or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, commercial grade.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not something you'd get at Lowe's and Home Depot
Right,
like most
right,
people would get
right.
and put in their yard.
Right.
This thing just
this emits so much smoke and has so much danger associated with it.
So what authority does the zoning administrator have to request them to put it in the backyard? Is that a courtesy thing?
No, the trailers are not supposed to be parked in the front.
Okay.
Right now, we don't have anything regulating the smokers themselves.
All right. So, and from a nuisance perspective, if it was kept in the backyard, both of them, you would still view it as a problem.
When they have had it in the backyard, my house is an old drafty house like that one, and smoke enters my house more easily from the back than it does the front. So that's why I don't complain sometimes, because they move it to the back, then I get it from the back. And it's a major issue from the back as well as the front. You just don't see it out front. That's the only difference.
You say they're not allowed to park on the front of the house?
Correct.
Or the street side?
The front yard,
Or in the front yard? What about on the street?
that becomes a police department issue.
Okay, because I'm very familiar about the trailer and the location, because that's right in, what, 3 houses, 1, 2, 3 houses from a church. So that makes it a constricted thing there. But I have never seen it in operation, and I'm at church quite a bit.
So I had a fairly lengthy conversation with the city attorney about this.
Okay.
And I think the reason we're sitting here today is because there's really no satisfaction that's been given based on the city's existing codes and ordinances. So, you know, you end up here, oh, we'll change the zoning ordinance and just limit the size of the smokers that can be had. You know, first, the zoning ordinance says you can't put them in the front yard, so if you move them to the back, then you're still left with the issue of the amount of smoke that's generated by them, okay? If you start going down that path, do you want to start regulating wood stoves? Do you want to start regulating smaller grills, that kind of stuff? I think where we're at is we're really at the definition or the difference between a public nuisance. Is it's a nuisance that is, is causing an issue for the entire neighborhood, or is it a private nuisance between one property owner and the other? And there's a different way that you deal with those things. So my recommendation to you before you make a decision on going off to amend the zoning ordinance or not would be to invite the city attorney to come and talk to you about the differences between public and private nuisances, because you could definitely on your own take your neighbor to court over this smoke, and the city is not involved with that. Yet typically what happens is citizens want the local government to come and solve disputes between private property owners. And unless it arises to the level of a public nuisance, that's not the city's job. So I would encourage you to let's invite the city attorney to your next meeting and have a discussion about those differences before you choose to amend the zoning ordinance.
Let me ask one question about that. Let's say a citizen came forward and had a petition with like 200 signatures. Does that become an obvious public nuisance at that point, do you think?
If they were all complaining about
the one thing?
This smoke, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm very sympathetic to your situation,
right.
Mr. Erbacher, and I'm sorry you have a bad neighbor next door. And I'd say that to him if he were here. You know, you've got to be more considerate of your neighbor. You know, how much we can do to help the problem. I think it's a great idea to have the city attorney come and talk to us. I invite you to come back to that. I don't know, have you talked to the city attorney on your own? Yeah, I think that would be helpful for you to come. You'd get some free legal advice, quite candidly. Come and let's discuss it and see what the options are. And as I said, if there's something that we can do that makes sense from the community's viewpoint, we'll do it. And I'm not suggesting how you go about this, but I think as Mr. Rogers just sort of suggested, if there are other neighbors in the neighborhood that have problems with this gentleman, have them come to the meeting as well. I have a neighbor on other side of them, they have kids that play with their kids. I thought about approaching them, but I never have. They probably wouldn't do it because their kids are friends.
Might give them meat, too. A lot of times people, I had noticed one in my neighborhood who does that, and they actually give meat to a lot of people around them.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of,
Yeah.
then when people smell the smoke, they're like, yeah, there's meat. You know, I wonder if, I wonder if that isn't part, I thought they were commercial. That's why I was asking about the zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely
If that was a commercial
commercial grade
issue.
is definitely, and I think you
Yeah.
do say that somewhere, commercial size is a
Yeah.
good distinction. But I just remember a somewhat similar situation several years ago where someone was complaining about stormwater runoff from their neighbor's property, and the city said,
Right.
there's nothing,
Right.
there's nothing we can do about it. They're not violating anything, it just happens to run off every time it rains hard. And so, I think,
Yeah, I think hers had, I know the lady in question, and I think I'm thinking of the same one, but that had something to do with the way that the road had been reconfigured. It-
yeah,
it-
you're right. So it was a little bit more
A
complicated,
little bit
but
more.
from a neighborly standpoint, it was still kind of,
Yeah.
Could I ask a question? Tom, is there no air pollution standard that this is violating, or is it not measurable enough?
That's what they would be looking, that's part of the nuisance ordinance. So obviously up until this point, no, there's been none.
And PD and fire generally handle the nuisance ordinance, so we're not as involved with that stuff.
And, you know, you said this has been going on for 6 years?
Roughly 7 years.
7 years, and this is the first I've heard of it because they're like, oh, well, go change the zoning ordinance. But, you know, you run the risk of, you know, what about outside wood stoves, all of that.
Right.
Well, how did we come up with something like chickens? How was that particular amendment written into the zoning ordinance?
Oh my gosh, Bob, are you serious?
No, I'm sitting here going, look, there's not a lot of difference
You spent
between.
2 years
Talking about chickens.
No, but I'm just, no, my question is, there's a number of chickens that you're allowed to have, and you're allowed to have that number of chickens, set number of feet back. So somebody sat down and said, there is a unit of chicken smell that is okay. And I'm just trying to figure out,
I don't think it was based on the smell, it was based upon.
I don't either,
chicken-
but I'm trying to
chicken
figure
land
out,
area.
what's that?
7 units.
It was a land area as related to the number of chickens. You know, chickens this big.
No, I understand, no.
But the coop
I know,
has to be a certain number of feet, I think, right?
Yeah,
Something
Well, I
like that.
think.
But that goes straight at your private versus public nuisance situation. Because I agree with you, I don't know how you would, and the reason I ask about the chickens is, did somebody sit down and say, this is enough? Because if I've got that much smoke blowing in my yard, I think that's a problem. But to your point, and I completely agree with that, I don't want to be sitting there with some kind of smoke-o-meter trying to figure out, this is too much in this situation, but here's somebody's, you know, wood stove or gas grill or whatever, and now I've got to go and, I don't even know how you do that.
really, truly, the only thing the zoning ordinance could do is limit the size of them and the placement.
Yeah, and I don't know, yeah,
I mean, you limit it down to the size of a normal
right.
grill.
But again,
or
I think
smoke.
it goes back to our enforceable
But
issue.
then we have to go out and measure
Yeah.
things. So I think you should talk to the city attorney, but to me, it more rises to the level of a private nuisance.
It might be good to have him come to the next meeting if he'd be willing to.
I'm sure he will. He will.
It's the-
as it was mentioned, public meeting.
Yeah.
You could feel, please come and
Maybe just
It's-
for the
Well, I know
4th of
what
July
that
barbecue
is.
season.
I'll email you.
Okay. I called the fire department about this a couple of years ago, and they used to have it 5 feet off. See that wooden fence? They had it 5 feet from that. So it was really close to my truck, which I was wary of in my house. The fire department came out and said, well, you can have it 10 feet off. So they moved it 10 feet off. And that seemed to be the only requirement that the fire department had, was 10 feet back. And when it's not in the front of the house, it just has to be where that front porch stops. See where the gutter is? Technically, all they have to do is move it right there.
Right, front wall.
But then he'd be
Yeah.
too close to your fence.
you know, that's their fence, but technically, they don't really have to move it to the backyard per city regulation. They just have to move it to where that gutter is, which they've done before, and that's all they have to do.
But to operate it, it has to be 10 feet away. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Right.
Yeah,
And there
so he
seems to be
said
no
to move
regulations
anywhere.
much that the fire department has. They came out and looked at it, did a 2-minute look and walked away. There seem to be no regulations in place to govern anything like that.
I think it'd be wise we have the attorney come and speak with us.
And what's the date of our next scheduled meeting, Tom?
I don't believe we have any items next.
25th, I
Maybe.
thought we did.
Oh,
If you were
oh,
going to
yeah,
do
yeah.
that comp plan amendment.
That's not going to happen. Which comp plan, man?
I thought you did. Did you already do it? Did you already initiate it?
Yeah, it'll be July
I know.
July the 10th?
10th.
I will not be present.
Yeah, we'll confirm that.
And I don't know if that, Mr. Erbrocker, I don't know if July the 10th works with the city attorney's schedule or not, but that would be when we would, ask him to check his calendar and attend.
All right, and before you guys mark the 26th off, we'll confirm that we're not having a meeting that day.
Oh, too late.
I hear you guys getting excited.
I've already checked it, I've already looked at it.
I was getting ready to.
Use pencil.
Yeah. And I know it seems like a long way away, but I am not going to be here in August, so at least for the first part of the month.
Thank you for bringing that concern
Okay.
forward, and please be sure to attend when the attorney's here.
All right.
It'd be great, and if you have other neighbors who are feeling the same, it'd be good to have them too.
I approached one, but they were reluctant to step forward. His wife didn't want to do it. Because I'd actually drawn up a petition, asked him to sign it. And they wouldn't sign it because they just didn't want to get involved.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Okay.
I appreciate it. All right. Now, do we have any other business?
No, we'd like to introduce you to Eve Mergenthal.
I've been getting emails from her.
Yeah. Otherwise known as Mothball.
Don't do that, Tom. I was sitting there looking at Rachel today going, Rachel, I'm gonna have to get you to tell me your last name because Tom butchers it so badly every time. Now it's stuck in my head.
And now it'll be in the minutes too.
First try. I can say it now, I just can't spell it. So, yeah, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself and how excited you are to be here and all that?
Very excited.
Can't even see anything else.
There you go. Where did you come from?
What do you mean?
Where were you working before?
I was working on Delta Kappa over in Lexington. It's a National Leadership Honor Society. But now I'm here.
She interviewed very well, believe it or not.
I understand.
I wasn't prepared for these questions.
And I understand she graduated from Sweet Briar College.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a good sign. That's where I teach.
Oh.
Are you from this area?
No, originally I'm from Connecticut.
Great.
And what brought you to this area?
Sweet Briar.
And you just
And
fell
then
in
I
love
just
with
ended
it?
up staying. Yeah.
When do you graduate?
2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's picking up very quickly. You'll be seeing more of her and more emails.
But glad to have you with us.
We'll
Yeah.
get you a
She'll be doing
southern
the
draw in no
minutes.
time.
Yeah, so I think it deserves a round of applause that she's.
Yeah.
Super rad. Proud. Do me proud.
Okay.
Great.
I'll make a
All right.
motion we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All opposed? None? All right.